This is gonna be the worst year for the bloopers episode because every sound test is just, I like talking to microphones.
I like Mike King and the taco phones.
Welcome to No Clip. I'm Chad Rudderman.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today we're going to be talking about Silent Hill 2, which was released on the PlayStation 2 in 2001 and was developed by Team Silent, which is in itself a development studio in-house for the publisher Konami. We're again talking about a Konami game twice in 2 months. Silent Hill 2 is a survival horror game, and in fact is sort of like the survival horror game that survival horror fans like to look to and be like, that's the one. That's the game that we like. They say.
Direct quote.
Yes. And put on the back of the box. So this game's old. This game can now go to the store and buy a pack of cigarettes if it wants to. Mm-hmm. And because of that, there's a lot of sort of like jank in this game that over time gets older and older and weirder to play. Mm-hmm. But before we get into any of that, because I do want to talk about sort of this game in a modern context, this is the first time both of us have played it.
Right.
I want to get out of the way immediately that this game is real good, actually. And nothing that I say during this podcast about like some of the weirdness in it is to take away from that. This game, for the first time in a while, scared me. Like this game made me tense in a way that I haven't in a long, long time. I don't know if you had a similar experience.
Yes and no, I guess. The game didn't specifically scare me. I'm pretty hard to scare, I think.
I am a coward.
I've just kind of become desensitized to it in my old age. Mm-hmm. But the game, I think, is definitely good at being a psychological horror game. I think it definitely unsettled me and made me think about weird and disturbing things, which is I kind of think what it wants to do more than scare you anyway.
I mean, I guess it kind of like depends on how you define fear.
Yeah.
Which is a real cliche and weird thing to say. This game doesn't like startle you. I think that in the entirety of the game there's like 2 jump scares, one of which is actually like kind of hidden, which what I'm talking about there, because it's pointless, so I'll just go ahead and explain now, is there's like a point in the prison area where if you knock on the door to a stall in the women's bathroom, it says like nobody answered, but then if you try and leave, there's somebody's like, "Bah!"
Yeah,
and you're like, oh, pterodactyl, that's stall. Excuse me. But yeah, and that's like, I think that for the majority of this game, the feeling they want to give you is one of like dread, maybe, is the way to put it. Like, not feeling like you're in danger immediately, but that you could be in danger and that you're uncertain of what the danger is.
Yeah, like there's always something to be worried about.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is its strength. More than anything. I was kind of like, I was putting off playing this game for a while, and I don't really know exactly what it was about it, but I think I was a little afraid that I wasn't going to like the game. Mm-hmm. This just happened with Symphony of the Night, so I was just kind of like, oh geez, like I don't want another one of those experiences. And so I ended up playing this game in 2 sittings, and doing it like that, like, really kind of like makes you stew in the game for long periods of time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it worked. It worked real well for me. I was surprised.
Yeah, I also played it in 2 or 3 sittings, and I think it's one of those games that's at that appropriate length,
Hmm.
or I think it makes it better if you play it that way.
I would agree. I think that we've talked about this on the podcast before, but we have we do like a game that knows how long it's supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like Silent Hill is pretty close to ideal in that. I don't think this game could have gone on for a whole lot longer, and it's still been good.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd agree with that.
yeah. So I don't know how it took. I think I finished the game at about like somewhere between 9 and 10 hours, like 9.5, 9:45.
Uh-huh.
And that felt pretty appropriate to me. And that's like my save data time, so it doesn't count up time where I died, which didn't happen super often, but enough that it probably added another like 40 or so minutes onto it. But yeah, it felt like an appropriate length. It felt like it paced itself pretty well. There are a couple of issues that I do want to talk about. Yeah, overall, I'm very happy with this.
Yeah.
Good work, Konami, 18 years ago.
You get an A+ on your report card, Konami. But I think I'm glad that you touched on this stuff early, because that's one of the big things that made me think of was like how well like designed this game is. I think it had to have been like quite the experience to be working in games back then. It was just kind of like a new frontier, and you had all these limitations, and you're like, how do I make any of this good, like on this limited hardware, especially like in early 3D or like on the NES, like when it was like really the Wild West of like figuring out how to develop these things.
Right.
And it's just like there's so many like limitations and things that I think they do like such a great job of designing around.
Yeah. I think I kind of wanted to know what you thought about how this game aged, because I think that
Like visually or like overall.
that's like the trick, right? Because
Yeah.
I think I think that this game shows its age. This
Yeah.
is like almost like the George Clooney of games.
I don't know if
Where
I'd go that far.
I think that it looks outstanding for what it is, and which is an old man. uh, but and it also it plays well, but you can tell that the conventions are coming from a different time.
Yeah.
But I don't think it has anything that's like so like anachronistic in 2019 that it really stands out. Like save points in a survival horror game are not something that I would ever complain about, because it just works with the format so well. Visually, I think it looks really good for the time, and it isn't even an art style choice because it's not stylized. I mean, it is stylized, but the designs are stylized. The overall design, like the world, is supposed to be realistic. Like the tech is just good enough that it doesn't look that bad, even this many years later.
Yeah. There's a lot of subtle art direction going on, like that they put that film grain filter over the game, and they use the fog to kind of hide the imperfections. So there's more of an artistic like angle to that than you'd probably expect. But overall, I think visually the game holds up really well. For the most part, especially I think the environments are really cool. There's not a lot of like repeat environments. Like it doesn't feel like very much is copy pasted, which is something that you get in a lot of games from the time. And I think basically like tonally, visually, and all of like that side of things, I think all holds up really well. But for me, mechanically, it falls down pretty hard.
Yeah.
Because like I pretty much just missed the boat on tank controls. Like they are mind-bogglingly awkward and like awful to me.
Right.
Like I'm like, how did anyone think this was a good idea when I'm playing? I mean, I understand because like it changes perspective. So like you holding up just always makes you go forward, so it doesn't like make you spin around when you transition. But like it just really bugs me to just like be trying to walk around a room and pick things up and just be like shifting
Yeah.
all over like with your character, you know, like It's just really clunky.
There's a sequence really early on, and they do this a couple of times in the game, where the object of the scene is for you to go from one location to another over a very long expanse of ground. Like, it's a really long walk, and they do this 3 or 4 times, but the first time is the one where it stands out because you're going down like
That
a
path.
winding mountain pathway, and yeah, the tank controls as a concept I don't think are inherently flawed, but I understand the like resistance to them. They are not intuitive from the perspective of somebody who's been playing 3D games that control like Mario their entire life. And I think that like the way that they work indoors is usually fine because you're going down narrow hallways or in square rooms and you usually don't have to make any quick movements. And we'll get into when you do have to make quick movements and it's bad in a bit. But when you're going down that windy mountain pathway, it's like James is drunk off his ass.
Yep.
He's just stumbling around outside like, whoa, now I'm on this end of the path. And then, I'm over here.
It also really stands out when you're just in the town and you want to run in a straight line. You're like, man, this is really hard to just go straight.
And because theoretically it shouldn't be hard with tank controls.
Yeah.
You point him in the direction you want and you hold up, but like any deviation in one way or another makes him halt, turn, and then move in a different direction. I know that like I would be holding up to move forward and then I would like scratch my head or something like a normal thing a person would do.
Mm-hmm.
And the controller would shift in my hand ever so slightly, a few degrees.
Yep.
And he would just immediately start running into a wall.
Yeah, I found myself really kind of wishing they would have just ripped off the Resident Evil turnaround thing.
Oh, yeah, like the quick turn?
Yeah, I felt like that would have been really nice to have in this.
I could see that in combat. And as long as we're talking about this...
Like, if we're trying to go, like, down a hallway, take, like, the hospital, for example... A lot of going back and forth along hallways.
Yes.
And like getting to the end of one and then just being able to turn around and come back smoothly would have been amazing. But you had to do like the awkward kind of like turn around and then probably had to back up a bit. You know,
yeah, do the
like,
3-point turn
like
because
it's too wide. Yeah, because it's a tank control scheme. Yeah, and it's just.
Yeah, and the hospital is the place where, as you mentioned, there isn't a lot of copying and pasting. The hospital is the place where there's the most of that. Iconic as it is very, like, 3 almost identical floors that you kind of go back and forth in. And, yeah, you get caught up in hallways a lot, having to move around in weird ways. I don't know. I can't spin that in a positive way, and I don't even think I'm going to try. It's just, it gets a little awkward sometimes. And the camera goes back and forth from being, like, one of my favorite elements of this game to being one of the worst things in the entire fucking world.
Yeah.
Where
that just happens. Like, pre-rendered cameras can be really great on occasion, but, like, there's always going to be one, you know, every once in a while that just does not gel with you. You're like, I really like to look at this from a different perspective, and you can't.
Well, then there's there's a button on your controller that is essentially a lottery ticket in this game, which is the L2 button, which I don't know what it does. Like, it changes the camera, but the way in which it moves the camera, there's no way for you to predict. I have no idea what, like, maybe there's a system in there that I don't understand, but if you, like, move and you press the L2 button, the camera will, like, hurry into its final position, maybe. That might be it. So occasionally I would hit it just to see if I could get a better angle, and it would just, like, slightly zoom in on James, and I'm like, I don't think that's what I wanted it to do. And then other times, like, I'd hit it and it would just, like, flip the other direction. I didn't know.
I thought that it was supposed to, like, move the camera, like, not behind you, because it doesn't do that a lot of the time, but, like, focus the camera on James.
I guess.
I think is what it's supposed to do. But, I mean, I didn't use it either.
Yeah. I mean, I did use it, but only in times when I felt like I was not at all getting the important information from, like, the room I was in.
Yeah.
It was very seldom that I used it. One game that does have a button that immediately snaps the camera behind you is The Legend of Zelda. Not the one from 1986, but the
Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, 3D Zelda games have a button traditionally that'll just flip the camera around to be behind you. And this being what is essentially like a rival series to Capcom's Resident Evil series, I was expecting, I think, going in and having played Silent Hill 4 The Room, which plays a little bit closer to what a Resident Evil game is as compared to this one. I felt like the design of this game overall, like the actual play design of it, would be closer to a Resident Evil game, given its like pedigree and the year that it came out. But it actually feels more like a Zelda game to me. And hear me out on this one.
Okay.
Because it's not, obviously, there are a lot of things where this differs from a Zelda game. I mean, both of them focus on, like, psychological horror. But I feel like Silent Hill 2, from start to finish, is an overworld and 4 dungeons. And the dungeon parts of it, the apartment, the hospital, the prison, and the hotel, all feel like you go in, you have like your shit that you've collected, the important items from the other dungeons, and then you pick up puzzle items, put them together, and use them to unlock doors and get to a boss. And it's very strange to me because I started looking at it in that light after the hospital. I was like, this feels like weirdly familiar. And I was trying to think, like, is this just all video games? Like, first, like, I want to get that out of the way. And I don't think it is. I feel like it really does take from Ocarina in a way that is kind of like...
I'll agree with you on, like, the kind of basic structure where it is kind of like an overworld that leads to different dungeons. But the puzzles felt very Resident Evil to me. And I feel like a lot of like that kind of structure feels very like tied to Zelda, but you can find similar stuff in a lot of games.
True. I just maybe I'm just among the crop of people who sort of credits Ocarina with like the design of 3D adventure games as a whole. And like at the basis level, this is a 3D adventure game, and it does very similar things. There are fewer puzzles and they're less item dependent.
Yeah.
But other than that, though, yeah, like the structure does feel like you get keys and unlock bigger parts, and sometimes you use the things in those parts to come back to the earlier parts and do stuff there.
I feel like it feels more direct because of the time the game came out. Like I feel like there was less of like a wide variety of like kinds of games that were being made back then. So like the comparisons, like the fact that it was a 3D game, well, as you said, like a 3D adventure game, it takes cues from Zelda in a more obvious way than other games, you know, like that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I just couldn't shake that feeling. And I'm not 100% sure why it was. It just kind of festered.
It's because it occurred to you, and then you couldn't not think of it that way.
It's like how I think that Mad Caddies album is about zombies.
Yeah.
Because I thought about it once, and now I'm like, that's got to be it. Like, yeah, I guess while we're on the topic of mechanics, let's just sort of like run through the rest of them before we get into sort of the meat and potatoes, the thematic elements of the narrative. And I guess I want to be like, why is there so much combat in this game?
Because it's a video game, Shan.
That's true.
I kind of agree. With as stiff as the combat is, I feel like either make a better combat system or don't have one.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know. I don't want to go that far, and the only reason that I don't is because I feel like combat in survival horror games is like one of those things that can be a really enhancing experience. Like looking at the original Resident Evil game, because it's the easiest one to point to and most people have played it.
Mm-hmm.
You want to, as a point of fact in survival games, you want to conserve your health. Conserve your health.
Mm-hmm.
You want to conserve your health, and you want to conserve your ammo. And the reason is because the guns are good, and not using the guns on an enemy means you have to run away from them. And having a tension there between how much resources, how many of them you have, versus how many enemies there are, and your like ability to get out of the way, is a source of tension in the game. And I think that Silent Hill 2 doesn't have that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant by better combat system.
Okay.
And
fair.
I don't mean to suggest like an action combo system or something.
It's kind of like maybe a more engaging.
No, yeah, I mean,
no.
like, I feel like something more defensive, that encourages you to kind of either run away and only ever, like, fight back if you have to, would be a lot better.
Yeah, because I spent the first half of the game running away from most enemies.
See, I did the opposite. I feel like I killed every single enemy for a while before I was like, this is kind of boring. I think maybe I'll run away. It's starting to make this not very scary at all. And I can just stand there and wail on them with this
pipe
board.
everyone to death. I used the pipe a fair share of amount. You get the little stats thing at the end of the game, and I killed one more enemy with guns than I did with a pipe and a board. And I think that that shit, like, it's almost exactly the midway point of the game when I was like, I think I was in the hospital and was moving around in the hospital, and there are all these enemies, and I'm like, I can't run away from all of them, so I have to start killing them regularly. And I went into my inventory and I saw that I had 135 handgun bullets, and I was like, that's 3 digits of handgun bullets. That seems unreasonable for this kind of a game. And so I just started unloading on everybody at that point. Like, James became like an action hero.
Yeah, the split for me was I killed 71 enemies with melee attacks and like 21 with bullets. I was really reluctant to use the guns because in the hotel, which is the first dungeon, you go into
the apartment.
Oh, that's what I meant. Apartment. And it's when you get the handgun, and you don't have a lot of bullets to start out with, so
right.
I didn't want to use it. And then you run into Pyramid Head, and I'm like, oh shit, like it's like a boss encounter. So like, this is what I want to save the guns for, and I just had that in my head that like, pull out the guns when shit gets real,
right?
And then I just never readjusted that, because like I got the shotgun and I kept getting more bullets, and I just like never was like, I'll use these. I just kept on being like, no, just got to hit things with the board.
Yeah, there's a progression, like, as far as your understanding of the combat system goes, if you aren't familiar with this game, in that you wanted to use the melee weapons, you start to realize that you have a ton of pistol ammo, And so you start using the gun. At least this is my transition period here, because I shot a bunch of people with the pistol. I was like, yeah, feels pretty good. Doesn't take 14 years. Like, you just put a clip into somebody and then be on your merry way. And then I noticed that I also had triple digits of shotgun ammo at some point. So I was like, well, let's just start using the shotgun a little bit. Don't want to waste this precious ammo. But you realize that 100 shotgun bullets is like 10,000 pistol bullets, which is like an infinite number of boards. So you end up switching over the shotgun as like your primary, just walking, or your what do they call that, your everyday carry.
Yeah.
It's like a big ass shotgun now, and it just makes all enemy encounters like much less threatening, and the combat itself kind of boring.
Yeah, the last
Guardian.
the hotel,
Gotcha.
the Lakeview Hotel, the last dungeon, as we're calling them.
See,
I've
gotten into your head.
Oh, it's just easier to call them that,
Right.
Because there's no other unifying name I can think of. But yeah, the entire last one, I just walked around with the shotgun and shot everything with the shotgun.
Right.
Because I had so much ammo. But no, I think it was about the same point for me in the hospital, where I had like a really hard time with that area because I was just trying to hit everything with a pipe. And towards the end of it, I started just like shotgunning anything that popped up because I was like low on health, and like just kind of scraping by between the save squares. And I'm like, okay, I had to, like, that's the point where I like reevaluated how I was playing. I feel like it probably should have maybe spiked up a little bit more in difficulty in the apartments to kind of get you there.
Yeah.
Or somewhere else along the way. Like, I don't know. Because it took me a while for that to click. But it might just be me.
It took you for a while to click, boom.
Exactly.
By POD. Yeah, no, that's I think it's a fair assessment. I actually didn't think about that. The difficulty of the apartment building being like tied up almost entirely in navigation as opposed to in
it's
combat.
More about the puzzles.
Yeah. I still think that the apartment is probably still the scariest part of the game, even though I think that I'm more into the really evocative visuals in the prison, and that was like my favorite chunk of the game, all told. I think that the apartment was more actually frightening because like lots of doors, lots of things at the end of hallways, kind of just like weird noises and sound effects.
Yeah, I think, yeah, actually, I'm like emerging from that forest pathway road into the actual town up through the apartments is probably the scariest part because it's where there's the most unknowns.
Right. And that, yeah, the enemy designs in this game are really iconic, or specifically at least Pyramid Head and the nurses are, like, people remember
I think
them.
The mannequins are the standout for me.
Mannequins are really dope. But I think that they kind of stopped at like 5, like they had 5 enemies and they were like, that seems good. And they just, one of them comes from the first Silent Hill game as well, the Crawly Men. I don't know what those are called.
Straight jackets.
Yeah, sure.
Because they have no arms and they look like they're struggling to like bust out of a straitjacket.
And also, like, people in straitjackets, they vomit poison on you.
Yeah,
yeah,
just like in real life.
Just like in real life. Silent Hill.
Yeah, I kind of liked that. Like, I'll be quick to complain about a lack of enemy variety in a lot of games, but I feel like it fits really well in this for some reason. I think part of it's the length and part of it's the theming.
Yeah. There's supposed to be manifestations of James's actual imagination, and like maybe the dude could come up with additional like like he wasn't trying to think of like new enemies that were fun to fight. He was trying to find his dead wife.
Yeah, it almost feels like eldritch horror in a way, where it's like these manifestations of his fears, you know, and these like kind of weird amorphous forms.
Yeah, and Pyramid Head especially gets the distinction of being like the most on a scale of like 1 to Lovecraft, he's closer to that end. Well, I don't think anything really reaches like the high numbers on that scale.
No.
I think Pyramid Head has this like cool mystique about him where he's functionally invincible and like is constantly pursuing you and doesn't appear to obey the laws of physics really, and just is really cool generally and does a good job of that. And that's also part of the reason why the hotel works, and also why the hotel ruined the last boss fight of the game, but or the second, whatever, because that version of Pyramid Head is literally invincible. Like, you cannot kill him. And then at the end of the game, they expect you to kill 2 of them.
I mean, to be fair, they do kill themselves.
That is also true, which is incredibly anticlimactic. But, like, I was not expecting... I died in that boss fight, and it was because I didn't think that the answer to the problem was shoot them with guns. Like, I immediately was just, like, running around looking for, like, a lever or something to pull.
You can just avoid them long enough that they will just kill themselves anyway.
Oh, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can't... I think it's possible to beat the game... only killing like a handful of things. Eddie and there's that one boss.
The abstract daddy?
Yeah. I feel like those might be the only instances where you have to kill something.
Mayhaps.
But don't quote me on that.
Yeah,
I'm not an expert.
I won't. Yeah, you could definitely do like what is essentially a pacifist run through and only kill bosses. Is there an ending that you can get where you don't have to fight Maria at the end?
I don't know. The ending that I got was the water one. Something about water.
I think there's 6 endings. 2 of them are joke endings that you have to do a bunch of stuff to get to. I got Leave, which...
Okay.
I don't know. You read a letter?
In my ending, I think I was reading what triggers it is... You go, I can't remember what the room's called, but there's kind of like a study in the hotel, and there's like some headphones that you can put on and listen to a recording, and it's like of like a therapy session or of like Mary talking to James about something or whatever, and that is what triggers the ending that I got, is finding that.
Gotcha. I also found that, but I'm not positive if...
Maybe there's other...
There are definitely other factors, but
Yeah.
I don't know what they are. Either way, though, this sounds like narrative stuff.
Yes.
Were there any other, like, mechanical bits that you wanted to get into before we take a break?
I guess I'll start with, like, a midway thoughts kind of a statement. Playing this, I felt a lot like... It's a shame that this series is basically dead.
Yeah.
Because it, as we were kind of let off with, I think it's held up really well. And I am just kind of shocked that there isn't at least something that's like swooped in to take its place as like the psychological horror like franchise. Because it feels like such a good counter to the more action-based Resident Evil, or not counter, but like, you know, like balance
a foil.
Yes. And it's just I don't know, it just really seems like a shame to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And also, like, even as Resident Evil progresses, like, the most recent game, as far as I'm aware, is 7, which came at the beginning of last year, and Resident Evil 7 slows things down. There's less gunplay, there's less like action sequences. It's in first person, and it's more sort of down to earth, but at the same time you do still like throw Molotov cocktails at zombies and like flying bees and shit, and it's crazy and way over the top, and is good. But this version doesn't exist anymore.
It's got very different goals.
Yeah, people would like to talk about... this is a really... Midway Thoughts is our new segment. To draw out the length when JJ is not here.
Yep.
People like to talk about how in the past couple of years we're in this era of ascended horror in cinema, and they're referring to things like The Witch and Midsummer and things like that are like horror movies that take themselves really seriously. And it's like, look, horror movies can also be just good movies regularly.
Yeah, they're more art house.
Yeah. And I feel like a really similar movement happened in games in like 2014. That was
It's a very specific year.
I don't know why. That's just the one that like comes to mind. I think it may have been a little earlier, actually.
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but it was games that were inspired by the likes of Amnesia. They're all these games that are really slow paced, really non-combat focused exploratory games, and I feel like that is what has supplanted Silent Hill.
There's a lot of like indie and smaller studio stuff, but like, it's weird to me there isn't another like big like AAA horror franchise like Resident Evil.
Right. Yeah.
That at least that I can think of.
No, it's true. Like as far as like The Evil Within,
like
has
Outlast
2 games.
is the only thing that I can think of in recent memory that was like a big popular horror IP.
Yeah, and even that's an indie title.
Yeah.
Like there isn't a counterpoint. I feel like those things supplanted Silent Hill, and the people who liked Silent Hill probably went to those games.
Yeah, I mean, I like the haunted house. That's kind of how I think of them.
Yeah.
Style of horror game, but like I feel like survival horror is like ripe for a comeback.
Right. Yeah, I think that there's a void.
Yeah, for sure. Like it was really refreshing when we played Fatal Frame.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it was like, man, I haven't played I had the same kind of revelation where like I don't even think about it till I play one. I'm like, wow, I haven't played like a survival horror game in a long time. And it got me really wishing that we could live in a reality where Konami just sells the rights to Silent Hill to Capcom, and the RE like remake team just makes a remake of Silent Hill 2 in the style of the Resident Evil remake, because I feel like that would be awesome.
That's true. And
just like that kind of visual update and like some control smoothing, I think would be great.
I don't know, man. The time controls are integral to the. I do.
You know, it would be better without them. You know it. Search your feelings.
I
you know it to be true.
I think on that, because I now have a couple of things that I want to get into.
After the break.
Welcome back. So we were talking a little bit there at the end about the idea of a remake of Silent Hill 2. And there have been a couple of remakes of this game. There was a port initially to the Xbox that contained like a side story that we can't really comment on because we didn't play that version of the game. And then later there's a PC port. And the Xbox version of the game, most people think, is generally about as good as the PS2 version. And the PC version is largely considered to be, like, bad trash that you shouldn't play. Which I think is probably an overreaction, but at the same time, when you talk about Silent Hill 2, you kind of have to just play the original version.
Yeah, from my understanding, they ported it to the Xbox like really quick and dirty, and they had issues like replicating things they did on the PS2, and that the PC version is like uses the source code or whatever from the Xbox version and is even buggier and not good.
Yeah.
It's not optimized at all.
Yeah. And there's a simplicity to the PS2 version of the game that I think is sort of like part of its charm, or whatever the opposite of charm is in a horror game.
Because it was designed for the platform.
Yeah.
And unless you're going to like completely remake it, it's not going to look as good not on that platform.
This is true. But yeah, I do want to shout out Jack in the Discord for pointing out or like facilitating me finding an affordable copy of the PlayStation 2 version, because that is the version that we played.
Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, no, and that's cool, and I'm glad that we played this version of the game. I just don't really have context for the rest of it, and that's kind of all I wanted to get out of the way as far as like talking about a remake. Like if they did remake it, it would end up being probably very different, which could be good, it could be bad.
Yeah, I feel like if they were gonna do it, I would really want it to be like the Resident Evil remake, where I mean, they even had like the original team working on that. Like it's one of the best remakes ever done. So it's a high, I think anyway. So that's the kind of like level of quality I would want, or I wouldn't want it at all.
I think the only thing missing from the Resident Evil remake was the option to turn on old dialogue and include that FMV cutscene at the beginning. I feel like that would be the one thing, because like part of the charm of a Resident Evil game is how campy and cheesy it is.
Yeah.
And that's when I want to get into in Silent Hill 2. It's less. I would not describe Silent Hill 2 as campy, pretty much at all. I think that the game gets a lot of praise for a lot of things that it deserves praise for, but I also feel like it gets praise for its narrative. And I think a lot of that is of the time. And I don't want to get murdered by somebody for saying that maybe the story of Silent Hill 2 isn't as good as it was. But I think that context provides a lot, like time-wise. And I think that the game did something that I'm fairly comfortable in saying no other game had done at the time. And that's a huge step. Like, this is a really personal story for the main character. Like, it's not, you don't save the world. You don't, in most of everything in the game, you don't really even come out of it like, you're not a hero. And I think that's really powerful, and it's really effective in this game and in this context. I do think, because the voice acting gets praised a lot, is also an of the time thing, because I felt like specifically the guy who plays James is very like all over the place with the acting. At some points it even sounds like he might have an accent, but then it like goes away over time.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on the voice acting 100%. I'll come back to the story in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the voice acting definitely, like, thinking back, feels like it's better than most things at the time. But it does feel pretty stiff by today's standards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the direction is a little inconsistent. But for me, it's mostly fine, I think.
Yeah, it's beyond serviceable.
Yeah, the only thing that stands out to me on that front is Eddie as a character. His kind of cartoonish design doesn't help, but like he stands out like a sore thumb in this to me.
Yeah.
And then also he's a boss fight, which feels out of place. Like the one thing in this game that feels very like video gamey and of its time to me.
Yeah. Eddie is a character who was released 2001. Who looks good in the CGI scenes because it gives him this sort of like unreal, out of place look that
looks
makes
really
him
greasy.
Yeah, greasy and uncomfortable. And I think that plays to what they're going for with him. But it also, there's this disconnect because he's not supposed to be that character early on in the game. Mm-hmm. And then he's supposed to become more uncomfortable as time goes on. And they amp up his greasiness for sure as it goes on. It's not like it's bad. But every time that he's outside of it and they're using his regular character model, he looks like he's from another game. he looks like he's being pulled from Rascal and put into Silent Hill 2.
Yeah, actually, like almost kinda. Like he's got like a baseball cap and a striped t-shirt, like a teal and purple one or something. Like he looks like a cartoon character.
Yeah, it's super weird, and I do agree. Eddie feels really out of place. I thought that though his voice actor, I thought was arguably one of the better ones in the game. Like,
Yeah,
him and Angela, I think both are very strong characters,
Yeah.
like acting wise. Angela's a strong character in her own right.
I think she was my favorite.
Yeah, Angela's great.
Because like her and like Laura don't really pop up that much, but it feels like Eddie keeps showing up, and it's like I don't know what they were going for with him. It just didn't land with me.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like I
don't
liked his
disagree.
initial appearance, like in the hotel, and he's just like eating, or no, he's throwing up.
Throwing up.
He's just throwing up, and talking about like killing a guy or something. I thought that landed like real well, and I thought that was all I was going to see of him.
Right.
And then he keeps coming back, and I'm like, and more cartoony each time.
I have to say, I came into this game like slightly poisoned with knowledge because of just like the ubiquity of this game as far as like horror game fans go.
I know almost nothing, luckily.
That's a little surprising
Yeah.
actually. But yeah, so knowing that you didn't know things, how did you interpret Silent Hill, the town, going in? Like, did you think that Eddie was a real person from the beginning? And the same good, like Maria is kind of the breaking point, so we'll skip that for now. But because you run into Angelo immediately, and you run into Eddie pretty quickly afterward.
Being an old man and being some like genre savvy, I was suspicious of the legitimacy of any of the characters, especially if there's ever in something psychological characters that only you interact with, you always have to keep that in the back of your mind that they might not be real. So I was thinking about that pretty much the whole time. Is like as soon as I met Angela, I'm like, oh, I wonder if she's real or not. It's like a prerequisite.
That's true. I mean, no, that's fair.
But as it went on, I felt like they were real, but how everyone was experiencing the town was completely different than everyone else.
Yes. I believe that interpretation is 100% accurate to the actual game. I came in knowing about Silent Hill as we ended up in kind of the same boat, which I think speaks to the signaling that the game does. Because
I think Laura is what really tips the hat.
It does.
Because she just seems to walk around the town all carefree.
Unimpeded.
And never acknowledge the horrifying stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's an ending where you leave with Laura, though, which is unbelievable. Like, to me, like, with the ending that I got and my understanding of the game, I feel like Laura cannot be a real person. Like, she has to be a figment.
She seems the most suspect.
Yeah.
For sure. But it's hard to say.
Yeah. It is. It really is. And Maria is in kind of a similar boat, though obviously Maria is some kind of...
Oh, I feel like she's definitely not real.
Yeah,
she has to be not real.
Yeah, she is a mental projection of the main character because A, she looks exactly like Mary, and B, she dies like 5 times and comes back. So, yeah, so she is like... But she is a real thing, or like a physical thing in the same way that the nurses and the mannequins are. Because you shoot her with a gun and kill her like you do with the nurses and mannequins. So, but she's like representative of Mary in the real world. So she kind of occupies a strange space. Laura seems fake to me, but Eddie and Angela are definitely supposed to be real people who were just coincidentally also in Silent Hill at the time. But coming into the game, knowing about like the concept of Silent Hill and it being a town that's supposed to project your like innermost fears and self-consciousness onto itself, I having Angela there at the beginning, 100%. I was like, this isn't a real person. Like
Yeah.
this is just a big faker.
What a poser.
Yeah, a total poser. Yeah, I don't know. So I'm glad that we ended up having the same, like a not opinion, but the same like take on it.
Yeah, I like that it doesn't like spell it out either. It's like, for me, it was like there's a lot of details like that you don't think about in the moment, but when you think back on later, it all seems really obvious. Like the way that everyone acts, it's like they're all reacting to different things happening, and like that doesn't really sink in as the clue that it is. That like the town is showing them something completely different than what you're seeing until after the fact.
Yeah, and it's never like it's never called directly into attention. I think the only time I can remember them bringing up specific details is when James asks Eddie in the apartment if he was friends with that pyramid head thing. And he's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, like, that can even be interpreted as just like, I didn't see it,
Right.
versus that isn't what I would see. So, yeah, they do a good job with it. I feel like there's some fertile ground there for additional things, and there are also like 7 games in this series, so definitely possible that that happens. And I've played The Room, and I don't think that they really go into it. I've also played Shattered Memories, but the only thing I remember from that game is running really fast.
I've actually heard good things about that one.
Yeah, no, it was a fun game. Maybe we'll do it next year. Probably not, but we'll see. However, the other character that we really should talk about is Maria. Because her place in the narrative is about as foggy as Silent Hill itself is at times, where she obviously exists as this stand-in for Mary in James's mind, but they give you like it's hard to role play as James or to like put yourself in his shoes, because inherently Maria's the most suspicious thing that could ever exist. Like, way more suspicious than like walking corpses that vomit acid on you. Like, that I would be more willing to accept than the character of Maria as presented in Silent Hill. But he just kind of goes along with it like, you look exactly like her except your hair. And it's like, oh well, must be just a must be a coincidence that this is what's happening.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a personal hell kind of a thing, which is what I think the game is ultimately going for. But she you have to watch her die over and over, which is obviously what James feels guilty about, is that he like pulled the cord on his wife.
Yeah. Smothered her, actually.
Oh, okay.
It's really hard to tell from the scenes in the game.
Yeah.
But he kills her by suffocating.
I thought that was symbolic when he like laid his head down on her, but I guess he was smothering her. But okay.
I didn't pick up on it either, for what it's worth. I thought maybe he stabbed her to death.
But anyway, so I think he like at least part of this is something he's like willingly putting himself through, and I think that's why he just lets her follow him.
Yeah. Not to let Google color my interpretation of things, but that you were correct in a couple of instances there. One of the big ones is that he does feel a need to be punished, and supposedly that's what Pyramid Head is supposed to represent. The Pyramid Head's also weird contextually, because he's supposed to look like an executioner from the history of Silent Hill, which James would have only found out about like after getting into the town, which is also probably why Pyramid Head doesn't show up immediately.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the symbolism there, is that it's he's an executioner. James feels like he needs penance for his crimes. And then everything else is just like sexy, like creepy sexy.
Yeah.
Because of him feeling, I guess, frustrated. It's never like specified whether or not James actually like cheated while his wife was dying. It's like sort of implied, or at the very least it's implied that he was tempted to.
Yeah, it gives me like a Firewatch kind of vibe, where like his wife was hospitalized, so he like
That's a more appropriate comparison than I think I thought it was initially. Yeah.
so his mind wanders to that kind of stuff, and he feels guilty about it.
Maria's his Dahlia. What was her name?
Oh, Delilah.
Delilah. That's it. Dahlia would be the name in Silent Hill. Yeah, there's more specific symbolism that's used throughout the game that I don't necessarily want to get into because I didn't necessarily pick up on all of it or a lot of it potentially. Though I do want to, call out that it is really good at that. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not, but it does make you think about stuff more. The fact that the areas you go through are like the apartment building, I don't necessarily know if it has like a representative meaning, but the hospital's a really obvious allegory. The prison is kind of like his own thing where he feels like he can't do anything. And also Mary feeling like trapped because she's dying and can't do anything about it. And then the hotel, which is another one that's just like a literal reference to a physical place. One thing that I want to talk about that I thought was real fucking good is the fact that in the prison, you start the area off by going down this big ramp and then jumping in a hole, and then you continually descend like billions of miles beneath the Earth's surface, and then you end up like on a boat in a lake that's at ground level.
Yep.
It's very, very good because like the symbolism of descending is something that people use all the time, because it's just associated with bad shit.
Yeah.
But the fact that it then like puts you out in exactly the same spot, I feel like kind of rings true. Like I think it's I don't know, it's just a really good sequence, and I like all of that.
Yeah, it made me think of Majora's Mask at the beginning, where you fall down the pit, and then you just end up somewhere like that doesn't make any sense from where you think you should be. So there's a lot of little things like that make you keep questioning the reality that the game takes place in.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I like that whole like boat sequence. Like if you look at your like game stats or whatever at the end of the game, which is a very PS2 era thing to do, but that I really like. Let's have that make a comeback.
I would love to see that make a comeback.
But it gives you the results for that, like how long it took you to row across the lake, and I'm like, is that earnest or is that tongue in cheek?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's a real number.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like them putting it in, like as if you care at all.
Yeah, like where's the speedrun boat percent run? Yeah,
just thought that was funny.
No, it's real good. And that's the exact time that you should make a joke, I think, if you were this kind of game, is like at like post credits, here's the stat screen that tells you how far you went in a boat. But yeah, that's narrative content. Skeet bop beaver boo. I feel like there's something here that I want to talk about. I do not know how I feel about the soundtrack of this game. Like, I think that the sound design is more or less spectacular overall. I think
it's great, yeah.
Yeah. There's some areas where I felt like they kept playing sound effects in the background, even when you weren't doing anything, and it got a little bit, like, old. Like, it repeated itself so that it became less scary because you were used to it. But the music is really the sticking point for me because, like, it goes back and forth between, as you pointed out astutely, lo-fi hip-hop beats to study to, and like if Nine Inch Nails went through a breakup and were self-medicating with like real heavy drugs, because they're like these themes in the game that are really abstract and noisy in a way that I like, that comes out of nowhere and like shocks you. And then there are other things that feel like as you said, would be at home in a dating sim. It's like super strange and like back and forth. And I don't necessarily know that it always fit the tone quite right.
Yeah, there is a weird kind of variety to it that you wouldn't expect. What makes it feel a little like not as cohesive as it could be. But for the most part, it didn't really really stand out to me that much. Like the weird, like more industrial sounding actiony, like kind of reminds you of a torture chamber kind of music.
Yeah.
Is probably my least favorite. But I think the like the area, like the dungeon themes, I'll say, were all like really great.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as like ambiance goes, which you know is good because I pronounced it with two soft A's, it's like that is always on point. Like I think that they nail it when there are areas that are quiet. I think that it's just, there will be parts where you're like, oh, surprise, now it's real loud, and I don't know, you might like it, you might not. Because I liked probably more of the industrial stuff than you did, but at the same time, like, it gets the Pyramid Head encounter. I mean, we just have to keep coming back to it. It's iconic for a reason. The music that, like, Pyramid Head's theme is the most grating thing in the world and works so well every time that you encounter him, other than that first time.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing anything the first time, and it goes on for a really long time, and you'll probably die to it at least once and have to go back and do it again. With that like real loud going on. I don't know. There are just some interesting choices, especially with the sound design, that makes it like, I mean, maybe me feeling uncomfortable was what they were going for, but it was verging on irritated, which I don't think is what they want.
Yeah.
The end of this game is kind of, it's not like a boss rush, we'll say, but it is a lot of bosses in a much higher density than they were earlier in the game. Basically from Abstract Daddy to the Pyramid Heads to Maria, and Eddie also in between there. And I think that it's weird that I think games just felt like they needed final bosses, but they didn't need a final boss or any of those bosses, because it's not where the game's strengths lie, and it really emphasizes it when every boss arena is a square room and the optimal strategy is to run in a circle.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but it was softened a lot for me because I ended up saving so much of my ammo that they ended up being really easy.
Fair.
So, like, if I would have died on the double Pyramid Head boss or Maria, they probably would have been much soured to those. Or Mary, rather. Or is it Maria?
It's
whatever.
It's Maria. Well,
yeah.
Let's see the bosses.
Maria. But I was just able to kill them with the hunting rifle pretty easily.
Yeah. All right, I didn't want to, but I do want to talk about the Maria boss fight. Maybe one of the worst bosses like in a game. And I don't think it takes away from the game really as a whole, because it does feel like it's a capstone, and like she's in like a cool flying machine, and I'm okay with that. But man, is it stupid. Did you ever get hit by the, like, bug attack?
Oh, yeah.
How, like, it doesn't look like James even gives a shit. He's just, like, kind of, he's, like, waving his hand in front of the face like somebody farted or something.
Yeah,
like,
I don't even know if it does damage to you.
I think it's, like, one of the only things that hit me in the fight, and I did heal once. So I think it does a little bit of damage.
I couldn't avoid that. I would like run away, turn around, and then she was like shooting them at me already.
Yeah.
So I was like mash to get out of it, then shoot her, then run away again, and just do that over and over. Like mechanically very uninteresting.
Mm-hmm.
But if it would have been slightly less like a tedious loop like that, I feel like it. I don't know. Having like an easier fight to kind of let you stew in the moment, I think feels appropriate. But like having such a weird, limited interaction hurts it.
Yeah, I feel like people give a lot of shit to games whose final bosses are not like a culmination of the mechanics of the game used up to that point. Like just a recent example that comes to mind, God of War 3, the final boss is just like a million quick time events in a row, and obviously it sucks. So if you've played God of War 3, which I haven't, I just heard about this recently, I imagine that you hate that boss probably a lot more than this one, but I feel like this game could have benefited from doing something a little different, whether it's like I don't even know anything but this. They could have even used the same design and just had the fight play out in a different way. Like have it put you in like a smaller area and give you like a duck command or something to avoid ranged attacks. Mm-hmm. Just anything so that you're not doing the exact same thing with something that's supposed to be a bigger, more important moment in the game.
Yeah.
I did cap it off, though, by chopping her in half with the great knife.
Oh, nice.
Because I never really used it for the whole game.
I didn't either.
The movement penalty was too much.
But, no, I was, like, when I was playing through the game, I was surprised that it had bosses at all. Like, it just doesn't really feel like the kind of game that should have them. But I feel like they want you to, James to confront his like trauma or whatever at the end. So I understand like wanting to like do that as a boss fight, but I was almost thinking something like take a page out of like Ocarina of Time's book, another page out of it.
Yeah.
And do like an escape sequence or something as like an ending. Seems like it could be cool, but once again they want him to confront the trauma, so I don't know. But like another kind of climactic moment that isn't a fight, I think could have worked maybe better.
Yeah. Something like that. And like the Resident Evil's been using escape sequences as the thing for a long time. Metroid uses escape sequences. They're a legitimate, interesting way. And they've even said it, you got the boat. Like, why not boat?
Yeah.
Boat at us.
That sounds awful.
It would be bad.
But, because I was just thinking like how some platformers will have like a difficult platforming challenge instead of a final boss.
Right. Because most platformers don't have an interesting combat mechanic, and Silent Hill 2 doesn't have an interesting combat mechanic. Match made in heaven.
Mm-hmm. So I was like, you could find some way to lean into like the game's strengths as like a climactic thing.
Yeah. Couple of minor other things I want to point out regarding bosses. Another game thing that this predates by several years, but the Eddie boss fight made me feel like I was playing Dead Rising, which is weird. But Dead Rising was a Capcom developed game that came out. It was like a launch title for the Xbox 360. And the concept of it, very simple. It was like Dawn of the Dead, but to the point where they had to put a disclaimer on the box that it was not like related to anything that George Romero had done. Where you're in a mall, there's a bunch of zombies, and the game's really hard, but it's hard because your levels persist through playthroughs. So you're supposed to play through for a while, die, restart, and then go again. And one of the things that makes the game really hard is they have these bosses that have insane health pools. So you have to spend a lot of time like resource gathering, having healing items, having good weapons, and then you strategize to beat the boss. And it's an interesting way of playing the game. But Eddie feels like he was pulled out of that game and put into this one because he's just a regular dude. Like, he's just a guy in a t-shirt. And you fucking shoot him with a shotgun 100 times to kill him.
Yep.
And then at the end, James is like, I killed a person. I was like, you
You had a lot of time to think about that.
Yeah. It took so long. Even the first time after he ran away, you were like, "You get back here, fat ass! I'm gonna fill you with lead." The fucking
I'm gonna make
Doom
you
music
squeal.
starts playing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I died to him once and then switched to the hunting rifle, which makes him super easy because it's
True.
way faster.
If you ever like watch his gun firing animation is really funny too, because he starts with the gun really high up above his head and then catastrophically slowly brings it toward you. It just looks so bad. Oh man. I honestly kind of forget what my other point was.
I thought of a couple other things. I just a couple things I want to ask your opinion of. Is like, what did you think of the actual like town exploration?
A little shallow, but I love the idea.
Yeah, I found myself not exploring it a ton. I think it kind of hit a sweet spot for me with like something about like the scale of it combined with the fog made it feel like bigger than it really was.
Yeah.
Like there were streets that you just couldn't get to or whatever. But that, and I didn't feel like obligated or like to explore every nook and cranny like I would in a lot of other games. So like I just kind of explored when it felt relevant and didn't when it didn't.
Yeah, no, that's...
And I don't know, it just kind of like landed in a sweet spot for me. It does feel a little old and kind of empty, you know, playing it now, but like I felt like it actually held up pretty well.
I was surprised at how much real estate there was given the time. Like when I started the game, I was assuming it was going to be one of those things where you look at the map and it looks like it's this big expansive thing, but then you like run for like 3 seconds and open the map and you're way further than you were. But it feels very big. And I think it might be one of the things that actually benefits in the game from having maybe an abundance of resources. It makes combat less frightening, which I think is a net negative overall. But it means that you don't feel like you need to be like checking every drawer in every room to try and find ammo, which allows them to get away with making a bigger area that has less density of stuff in it. But other than that, yeah, completely agree. I think it's impressive.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask like how the puzzles landed with you. Like we mentioned the puzzles, but we didn't really talk about them.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, I think very presciently, that they felt like Resident Evil puzzles as opposed to anything else. And you're right. There is one thing I want to call out, though, that's very cool, is I didn't know that this was the case. And I've played other games that have a similar setting that don't do it quite as cool as this one does. There's a riddle difficulty that actually changes the clues and solutions to the riddles depending on which one you choose, and that's so good. I love that because people just aren't going to be as good or bad at those as other people.
Now, yeah, that stood out to me as well, that there's a separate combat and puzzle difficulty option. It just seems weird that isn't more of a thing. It seems like a good idea.
Well, it seems to me really hard to implement because you have to design every puzzle 3 times. But the simplicity, like you still have to get all the requisite parts, like the coin puzzle, right, in the apartment has 3... I read through all the difficulties for the puzzle, for this puzzle, just as like an example so that I knew what was going on with it. And you still have to get all 3 coins, and each of them is a logic puzzle based on this little like poem that's written on the box. And it's like, do this thing, like this person's here, and then this thing is relevant because of these. Right. You have to like interpret it and realize like one's a woman, one's a man, one's a snake, and then what do those things do and what's the relation, and like the names of them factor in the higher difficulties.
Right.
On easy, the riddle literally ends with the lines, "Don't fear, the puzzle is over. The puzzle is over." Because they only give you like 2 clues. And they're just like, put this here, put that there.
Wow.
But I don't know. I like that they're there. I think overall they were. There was one that I had an issue with, and it was a stupid one, and it wasn't even really a puzzle. And it was combining lighter wax horseshoe to make a handle.
Yeah.
That reeks of cat hair mustache to me.
Yep. That's definitely like a weird point and click puzzle.
That's just in this game.
Yep. But I felt like the puzzles. I also like puzzles in like these kinds of games.
Mm-hmm.
It's always nice to have something else to do other than just combat. But I felt like they were brought down by the movement. Like it'd be really easy to just like go past something, even like mashing on the X button and not have James pick it up.
Right.
So you could miss something, and like I also felt incentivized to like explore the whole area first, and then when a puzzle would come up, I'd have to re-explore everything, and I was like, but that's probably just my own fault. But
no, I think that your points are good. I think that it's really easy to step by stuff.
Yeah, so I did not like that, but like overall, I'd still take puzzles over no puzzles.
Yeah. I think this plays into maybe the last little bit that I wanted to talk about anyway. I agree. I think the puzzles generally were good. I think when the puzzles were just pick things up and then put them somewhere, it was less engaging. Mm-hmm. But like the hangman puzzle I thought was really good.
Oh yeah, that's the standout for sure.
Yeah, it's super good. You don't have to go find shit and put it in a thing. You just kind of look at one room, look at the other room, use information that you already have. It's like a really traditional puzzle, but it's a really well executed one. Mm-hmm. The issue that I have with the pick shit up puzzles in quotes because the level design doesn't really feel like the hospital was such a tedious area because there were a billion doors, and so what you did in the hospital was just go floor to floor and try opening every door.
Yep.
And then you have to remember what's in those rooms because you'll have to come back to them, and not everything gets marked on your map. So, I don't know. I didn't hate it necessarily. I just thought it was kind of the weakest element.
Yeah.
And things like your movement and the hit detection on your inspect button are, like, they just exacerbate the issues. I kind of chalked that up to old game weirdness.
Yeah.
And didn't want to like bring it up as like a big negative, but it did make certain parts of the game a lot less enjoyable to play.
Yeah. Now I think that's fair, but I mean, I'm not trying to like dunk on the game or anything by bringing it up. So I would do so guilt-free.
Yeah, when you go to Silent Hill, there will be like somebody moving awkwardly in a tight area, and you'll be like, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have criticized you. You were only 18." But I was actually going to bring that up originally and have just forgotten, so I'm glad that you did.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Do we have final thoughts? Any last word?
In some ways, this game was what I expected. A lot of like in the like clunky kind of controls, as you said, old game weirdness. Mm-hmm. But in other ways, it really surprised me. Like I think what really stands out is the game's subtlety. Like for its time, I feel like it was kind of unprecedented, unless I just have a big blind spot. It's just like a game that was more subtler, and I didn't even know. But it's so well done, I think. Given that there aren't like any other psychological horror games that I'm aware of, like they did it first and they did it really well, and it's a shame that Konami doesn't want to make games anymore.
I think that's a common refrain, not just on this podcast, but like everywhere at this point. They're like, "Wow, like now that they're we didn't know what we had until they were revealed to be assholes."
Yeah, so I don't know, like if because I had like some roughness with the tank controls and the kind of the basic gameplay, that I'm gonna be like eager to revisit it. But I'm glad that I played it and it's definitely going to be a game I think that sticks with me.
Yeah. I feel pretty similarly. I came into the game feeling like there was a pretty good chance that I was going to be turned off by how old and weird the gameplay is. That happens with these old survival horror games. There are lots of games that I've wanted to go back to.
It makes me feel so old too.
I know, because
they're PS2 games, and you can just like remember when the PS2 was the current console still.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
it did last for a long time.
Yep,
the PS2 did. And yeah, it's just like I felt like I was afraid that was going to be the thing that held me back. So even though I think this game was what I expected it to be, in a lot of ways, it also was so much more than that. Silent Hill bury me. It just like it outperformed in all the areas that I thought that it was not going to perform in, and the places where I thought that it wasn't as strong are like I expected those as well. So I don't know. Like I came away from this. I'm shocked that I haven't played it prior to this. I'm really glad that I have. And even though like I hear pretty bad things about some of the Silent Hill games in between that I haven't played, I kind of do want to check them out. Even the ones that, might not be so good.
Yeah, I'm more enticed to check out Shattered Memories.
Oh, yeah. We should, if any game was a good game for us to do like a recording of, like a let's play, it's Shattered Memories.
Yeah, I don't know why
so
it's
goofy.
that one, but like that one's always like stood out to me. Like people talk about it as like a hidden gem or whatever.
It's that Wii U exclusivity.
Oh, isn't it a Wii game?
It's that Wii exclusivity. I'm sorry, I misspoke. So yeah, thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time we're gonna talk. Wait, Andy.
What?
JJ's not here.
Oh shit!
Next time,
it's our chance.
Let's talk about Psychonauts.
Yes.
Let the platformers reign supreme. Until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com. There you can find our email address, our Twitter, our links to all of the old episodes on YouTube, our Discord where you can talk to us in like a cool, casual kind of way, and maybe point me to an eBay listing for another game that's too expensive to play normally. That's... You got like a big joke? I feel like
you have a knack for just like throwing in a descriptor that completely throws me off. Like if you would have just said you have a joke, wouldn't have been funny. But like that you said a big joke.
Well, I didn't want to hear it if it wasn't a big joke. I wanted only a small joke.
Awkwardly maneuver yourself with the tank controls over to the like button. Okay. Hit X a bunch of times and unsuccessfully hit it. Then come back, leave, come back 10 minutes later, try it again and hit it.
And smash that like button.
Yeah.
The Silent Hill, Hill.
Silent Hill.
That didn't go downhill at all.
It didn't go down Silent Hill.
Good job.
It couldn't go downhill because it started out so low already.